from all that I can see of this president, all that I've heard of him, he apologizes for America, he criticizes America.
If the Republican Party really wants to be taken seriously, really wants to avoid its problems of the past, now is the time for its leaders to stop this kind of nonsense. Enough!
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani refusing to back down after questioning the president's patriotism, while DNC Chair and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz fires back, calling such comments, quote, nonsense. And we're back now with the panel. So, Kirsten, the mayor has become increasingly outspoken the further away from office he becomes. His critics would say increasingly unhinged. What do you say?
Well, I think this is something that now Republicans don't want to have to defend, because it's one thing to be critical of the president and his handling of ISIS. It's another thing to go after him personally and to suggest that he, doesn't love America, isn't patriotic, and and go after his motivations. I think that this is something that probably a lot of Republicans just wish that Rudy Giuliani would stop saying.
Kimberly, do Republicans need to come forward and either agree with him or denounce him? Scott Walker got asked about it. I just asked Governor Pence about it.
I think they just need to talk about the problems with Barack Obama's policies, and there's plenty enough to say just there.
Peter, what's your take?
Well, I think actually the White House doesn't mind this conversation in some ways, because it allows them to sort of paint the opposition as being so extreme that they look more reasonable in their view. On the other hand, it can't be good to have the president's patriotism questioned for 3, 4, 5 days, as we've been doing, and they'd rather get back to, I think, a policy-oriented.
You heard Governor Pence say it's not helpful to question a president's patriotism, regardless of which president it is. You agree?
I do. There are certain questions that, if you're going to answer them at all, you answer them yes. Do you believe in evolution? Yep. Is the president patriotic? Yes. And then go on to something else.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's go on to some of the potential candidates for 2016, because I think Rudy Giuliani is not in that club. Jeb Bush, big moment on the invisible primary trail, gave his big foreign policy speech in Chicago and kind of stumbled right out of the blocks. Let's listen to what happened here.
We definitely no longer inspire fear in our enemies. The problem is perhaps best demonstrated by this administration's approach to Iraq. We've had 35 years of experience with Iran.
Well, a little bit of a problem there with naming the countries. John Yoo, who was the architect of President Bush's enhanced interrogation policy, loved the speech. Others thought it was puzzling. Kimberly, what did you think?
Look, everyone feels that you have to do the big foreign policy speech if you're running for president, and he did that, and he largely hit all the right marks for the moment about what conservatives believe is a problem with the president's foreign policy. He didn't necessarily get into what his own ideas would be. I mean, it is a bit early still, so maybe that's understandable. But he's going to have to think about this very hard, because given his association with the former president, this is going to be one of the biggest topics that greets Jeb Bush if he goes out there. And so there's going to have to be a lot more thought put into this for future going forward.
George, did he help himself, hurt himself?
I don't think he hurt himself very much. The cosmetic minutiae of delivering the speech could have been better, but Ted Williams went 0 for 4, so people have bad days. The question really is, particularly now that he has associated himself with some of his brother's foreign policy advisors, sooner or later he has to answer the following question. If in 2003 we had known what we know now about the absence of the weapons of mass destruction and the problems of occupation and the difficulty of transplanting democracy, would you have invaded Iraq?
Didn't answer that question.
Well, I think, too, by the way, his speech touches on this fundamental debate that the Republicans are having about where they stand on issues of foreign policy and national security these days. More and more you're seeing it returning to a more hawkish set of conversation than it had been, a more, more withdrawn, less, some people said isolationist over the last few years. And it's interesting how it's, with the rise of ISIS, it's sort of changing that conversation.
His big theme of his speech was, I'm not my brother, I'm not my dad, I'm my own man. Can he so easily separate himself from the two?
Well, the problem with that is that his father and his brother really are not that much alike when it came to foreign policy.
So I thought
that was sort of a strange thing to say, because I think, I personally prefer that he was more like his father than like his brother. I think almost more important than the speech is the people he's hired to work on foreign policy. I mean, to have somebody like Paul Wolfowitz, whatever people think of him, he really is the face of the Iraq War in a lot of ways. And so I think for him to choose people like that, I think it's going to be something that's going to come back to bite him.
And a lot of other more, on the other side of the Republican spectrum as well.
There's an opportunity, though, here, too, in that the conflict that George W. Bush was in terms of Iraq and Afghanistan, it's entirely different, very different from the security situation and the problems that we face base now. He could embrace that and actually really craft his own strategy.
Let's move on to the Democratic side, because Hillary Clinton was in the news this past week when it was revealed the Clinton Foundation has since 2001 collected some $2 billion in donations, and that a large portion of that, even in the last couple of years, has come from foreign governments and foreign entities. Juan Williams is a little concerned about all of this. Let's listen to what he said.
Politically, this is a potentially catastrophic move for Hillary Clinton, and you know, evidence of a big blind spot if she thinks that she can continue to get away with it.
So, George, do you think this is going to be a big problem for her, the fact that these stories about what did these people buy, what kind of in with the Clintons did these people buy with their tens of millions of dollars?
It should be. The question is, will it be? The richer the Clintons get, the more they resemble the Snopeses, the rather low-rent people from a Faulkner novel. But one of the great strengths of the Clintons all along, particularly exemplified by Bill and the unpleasantness with Ms. Lewinsky, was a complete inability to be embarrassed. And the operation of the Clinton Foundation, with all this, as we say, the appearance of perhaps quid pro quo corruption, all of this demonstrates that strength. I don't think they care.
But Peter, what about this idea of the tin ear that Juan Williams is talking about in that interview, to donations that look, as Ron Fournier said, sleazy and stupid? You know, this happened with the Coffees, the Lincoln Bedroom, the Lippo Group, Charlie Tree, and then the Chinese, and it's kind of like,
you think you'd have learned, right? In fact, a lot of these the contributions they're accepting now had been banned by a voluntary agreement during her tenure as Secretary of State, because they recognized that it would be a conflict of interest. President Obama said we can't have that while you're serving at the State Department. As soon as she left, they began taking some of these foreign contributions again. I think it feeds into a larger concern, even within the Democratic Party, the Elizabeth Warren wing, that this is a moneyed Democratic operation rather than a populist Democratic operation.
Just before you start, Kimberly, the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation gave me this statement yesterday, quote, "Should Secretary Clinton decide to run for office, we will continue to ensure the Foundation's policies and practices regarding support from international partners are appropriate, just as we did when she served as Secretary of State." Does that fix it?
No, I mean, I think if they go down this road, in fact, that's why they're not going down this road. If they talk about stopping accepting the money, they got to talk about what they give back. And the foundation just doesn't want to do that. You don't solve this problem unless you give all the money back.
30 seconds left, Kirsten. Do they have to give this money back, or just stop taking it?
I think that it's going to be a problem with them actually with the left as much as anybody else, and precisely because of what Peter said. I think that there's so much concern that she is so cozy with wealthy donors and with businesses and corporations. This is really going to feed into that storyline.
A lot to chew over in the next, 22 months, I guess. Thanks so much, panel. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.